guys, hello, hi, welcome back to my channel. And yes, it's that time of the year again when the Women's Prize in Fiction long list is out. And let me tell you, I absolutely adore the Women's Prize, nominees. Okay, I think that the Women's Prize is doing an excellent job of selecting books from all over the world. And last year when I read the Women's Prize books, and I started with the long list, and then I slowly moved to the short list, I realized that this is the prize that I do want to keep following, reading every year. Okay, so for me, generally what I do is I follow the Booker. So the Booker, not the international one, because I don't know. I don't know the reason why I don't follow the international Booker, but I do follow the Booker. The English one that comes out, where the long list comes out in August. So I do follow that. But for me, in my heart, in my mind, Women's Prize has a higher place, and I think this is a debate for another day why I prefer reading the Women's Prize long list over the Booker long list, because with the Booker I only do the short list, but with the Women's Prize I always start with the long list, and then when the short list gets announced I read those books as well. Okay, so yeah, that being said, this year we have some very interesting nominees. I am really glad to see some familiar names here, because last year I could only see couple of familiar names, but over here I have seen some of the books that I've already put in my want to read list on my Goodreads, and some books that have been in my radar. And also the good part is I've read one of these books already when it was shortlisted for the Booker last year. Okay, so let's just go one by one. Let's do that. So the first book here is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. I hope I'm pronouncing the surname correctly. Basically, the book is about two Vietnamese women who go missing decades apart. Both are fearless, both are lost, and both will have their revenge. In 1986, it's the teenage daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese family that gets lost in an abandoned rubber plantation while fleeing her angry father. And in 2011, that is 25 years later, it's a young, unhappy Vietnamese American that disappears from her home in Saigon without a trace. So basically, it talks about the fates. Ignore that. But it basically talks about the fates of both of these women. And I've heard a lot about this book, right? It's generally something that people have been reading since a couple of months now, and I've seen this on Bookstagram. I've seen this on YouTube also, I think, but mainly it's been Bookstagram. So I'm really looking forward to read this. I am keeping this in my radar. I won't get to this ASAP, but then yes, this is one of the books that I might read from the long list. So also to add some information, the way this works is that I kind of pick and choose some books from the long list that I do want to read, that interest me, and then as and when the shortlist gets announced, I then concentrate on reading the entire shortlist of 6 books. Okay, so the next book here is Careless by Kirsty Capes, and it's an interesting cover. It looks like millennial fiction to me, because the cover of the book in itself is millennial or Gen Z fiction. Sometimes it's easy to fall between the cracks. At 3:04 p.m. on a hot, sticky day in June, Bess finds out she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker Henry, but he's useless. She should tell her foster mother Lisa, but she won't understand. She really ought to tell Boy, but she hasn't spoken to him in weeks. Bess knows more than anyone that love doesn't come without conditions. But this isn't a love story. Never judge a book by its cover, but this description just changed the way I look at this book. I think this is what I'll do. I'll go to Goodreads and I will check out, the reviews that people have put forward for this book, and then I may put it to my long list one. But yes, this is a potential long list read for me, and I'm keeping it aside because I really like it a lot. The next book is Creatures of Passage by Morowa. Yejidé, I hope that's how you pronounce her surname. Again, I'm bad with names like that. Basically, it's about Nephthys Kinwell, who's a taxi driver of sorts in Washington, D.C., ferrying ill-fated passengers in a haunted car. My jam. Someone said haunted. It's my jam. A 1967 Plymouth, that's the car, right? And with the ghost in the trunk. Unknown to Memphis, when the novel opens in 1977, estranged great nephew, 10-year-old Dash, is finding himself drawn to the banks of the very same river. Okay, so this is interesting. I mean, okay, this is not in my long list. Like looking at this particular description, it's basically about our main character having a twin brother, and the twin brother's ghost is kind of lurking around the car, and this twin brother was murdered, by the way. Okay, I'm not going into names, but yeah, basically her nephew, who is Dash, is finding himself drawn to the Anacostia River, which is where the brother's body was dumped, and it's very, very interesting. And this Dash has conversations with the river man, and the main character must face the family she abandoned and what frightens her the most when she looks in the mirror. I am really interested in this book. I'm not going to put this in my long list. I would say I think this is going to get shortlisted. Like looking at this description itself, I can tell you this might be shortlisted. But I think until the shortlist, I don't plan to read this. I'll keep this aside for now and let's see how it goes. The next book is Flamingo by Rachel Elliott, and it talks about what is it about? It talks about two families. So first there were flamingos, and then there were two families. Sherry and Leslie are the daughters, Andrea, Pauline, and Eve and her son Daniel. Sherry loves her husband Leslie, but she also loves Eve. It couldn't have been a happier summer, but then Eve left and everything went grey. And basically the novel is about power, of love, welcome and acceptance. It's a kind of celebration of kindness, of tenderness, and it's set in 2018 and in the 80s, and it's a song for the broken-hearted and big-hearted. This is very interesting, and this seems like the all-American novel, to be honest. I think I like to believe that Rachel Elliott is an American. I don't know this lady. I'm very sorry about that. If you've read her before. No, she is a Britisher. Okay, my bad. So she's from Cornwall in the UK. Interesting. Yeah, so I don't know, like it looks like something that I may not enjoy. So I'm not going to read this. But then I'll be looking forward to see if this is in the shortlist or not. And the next book is the one that I've already read, and that is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And let me tell you, I like when I read it for the Booker shortlist last year. By the way, this is a huge ass book. Okay, like the audiobook in itself is like a 25-hour audiobook, and it took me some time to finish it. Basically, this is about Marianne Graves, and she's someone who's aspiring to be an aviator, and that to like a female aviator. That's unheard of during the 1930s, somewhat in the footsteps of Amelia Earhart and people like that. And it's very interesting because there are like parallels to Earhart's story and this story. But one thing that this book does is that it kind of switches between timelines, and in the present timeline, there is someone making a biopic in Hollywood about Marianne Graves and about a lot of things about her life. And at the same time, like we have this protagonist kind of discovering herself. And I didn't like the Hollywood story-esque thing. Literally, it really put me off. But I really like the historical fiction part of it, and that's I liked it. And by the way, I do have like a separate review video down in the description box if you want to check it out, if you want to read this book or to check if it's your jam. So the Great Circle down below, please check out my review. Okay, that being said, the next book is called Remote Sympathy by Catherine Chidgey. I'm sorry, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his surname. I'm very sorry. But okay, the book is about moving away from their lovely apartment in Munich. Isn't nearly as wrenching an experience for Frau Greta Hahn as she had feared. Their new home is even lovelier than the one they left behind, and life in Buchenwald would appear to be idyllic. Again, German names, I'm maybe pronouncing it wrong. Lying just beyond the forest that surrounds them is the looming presence of a work camp. Frau Hahn's husband, S.S. Strum van Fru. I'm sorry, you get the point. Like this guy was, this guy was in the SS, Hitler, World War II, anybody. Okay, so basically this is set in and around World War II, which is very interesting, and it talks about this lady's poor health and how she's moving away from their lovely apartment in Munich to a concentration camp or somewhere near a concentration camp, and it kind of talks about I don't know. I'm really not sure what it talks about. All it says is that it compels you to question your continuing and willful ability to look the other way in a world that is enthralled to the idea that everything, even facts and morals, is relative. So this is interesting because her husband works in a concentration camp and she's moving away from like a cozy life to somewhere near a lot of pain and agony and death. Some of the most like the atrocious crimes happened which had happened to a set of people in the world. It's interesting. I like the concept, but I'll only read this if this is in the shortlist, I feel, because it's not attracting me that much. Like I get the idea of the book, but I don't know how well written it is. So if you've read any of these books and you want me to read it, please comment in the description box below and I'll read it. Okay. The next book is again a book I have not heard of, and that is Salt Lick by Lulu Allison. And this is also like a British author. It says Britain is awash, the sea creeps into the land, brambles and forest swamp, derelict towns. My bad. Food production has moved overseas and people are forced to move to the cities for work. Interesting. Sounds a bit dystopianish, The countryside is empty. A chorus, the herd of feral cows wander this newly wild land, watching over changing times, speaking with love and exasperation. Sorry. Interesting. I won't reading this book, but it's a very interesting take. It kind of reminds me of The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, which was nominated or shortlisted for the Booker and longlisted as well, of course, last year. And I won't be reading this book because I am not someone who's like a nature person. But then I think that this book is not even about nature, because it talks about like Jesse and his puppy Mr. Malik's. Oh, Mr. Malik's is the puppy's name. Roam the woods until his family are forced to leave for London. Interesting. So it kind of talks about him like reminiscing the nature and also going in search of the truth about her mother. Interesting, but I'm not going to read this, not in the long list anyway. Okay, so the next book is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. Again, I've not heard about this book. Everyone tells Martha Friel she is clever and beautiful, a brilliant writer who has been loved every day of her adult life by one man, her husband Patrick. A gift her mother said that not everybody gets. So why is everything broken? Why is Martha on the age of 40, friendless, practically jobless and so often sad? And why did Patrick decide to leave? And forced to return to her childhood home to live with her dysfunctional bohemian parents, Martha has one last chance to find out whether her life is too broken to fix, or whether maybe by starting over she will get to write a better ending for herself. Interesting stuff. I really am looking forward to not reading this, but to see this in the shortlist, because this is somewhat of like an existential crisis book from what I understand. Again, I do not know anything about the author, anything about the book, but if you've read this book, let me know if I should pick it up or not, because I'm really intrigued by this description. Okay? And the next one is a book that has been there in my radar since some time now, and that's Ruth Ozeki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. Okay, so basically it talks about Benny O, whose father has passed away, and he begins to hear voices, and these voices belong to the things in his house and sound variously pleasant, sad, angry. And okay, I'm reading this book, like it's interesting. It's a very interesting premise, and I have already like had an eye on this book. What I'll do is I will keep this in my radar, like somewhat in the second to last place. Currently at the last place is you build your house around my body, and then, of course, I'm going to put Ruth Ozeki there, right above, Violet Kupersmith. So let's see how it goes. I'm not promising that I'll get to the book soon, but I do want to get to the book soon. So that's the plan. And the next book is one of the most interesting books in this entire list. And I read it, I was like, yes, okay, fine. I think I should read this. I think this is something that I'll absolutely like. And it's by an author I do not know about, and that's Lisa Allen-Agostini. Okay, so let's check Lisa Allen-Agostini. Yes, she is an author. Oh, she is a Trinidadian journalist. Interesting. I think I'm going to read this book, but I just need to get hands on this book so that I can read it. The book is called, but I didn't really know what the book is called. The book is called The Bread the Devil Knead. It's basically about Alethea Lopez, who's about to turn 40, fashionable, feisty and fiercely independent. She manages her own boutique, but then behind closed doors, she's covering her bruises from her abusive partner and seeking solace in an affair with her boss. Interesting. And the book is basically about, there's also a murder apparently that happens in it, and the book is about what her next step is supposed to be as a woman and what woman does she want to be. Now, having read a voice from from the West Indies, typically from that region, the Caribbean region, my bad. Last year, through the Booker Women's Prize itself, not Booker, sorry. Through the Women's Prize itself, I read Cherry Jones' book, which is How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. So yes, this is there in my list, and I think this will get shortlisted. I'm thinking about it. So yes, about Ruth Ozeki, we have The Bread the Devil Knead, and I don't know how am I going to get this book. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have access to this book. So yeah. And the next book on the list is again something that's been in my radar, and it's interesting, but I've actually seen someone give this just 2 stars on Goodreads today, because I was like, yeah, I've seen this book somewhere, and someone on my friend list had read it. It says, meet the Han family gathering for a momentous weekend as a famous artist and notorious egoist Ray Han Rehan prepares for a new exhibition of his art, the first in many decades, and one he sure will burnish his reputation for good. And then his 3 children would be there, of course, and also Ray's wife is going to be there, right? And she's an artist too. And it kind of is a book about family secrets, because the wife is hiding something, the kids are hiding something or the other is going on. Yeah, so I'm not going to give this a chance right now. I'm going to wait for people to read it, and if it gets shortlisted, then I'm going to read it, because this doesn't seem very exciting to me. It's just about family secrets. And the next one is the famous Elif Shafak's really, I would say, hyped up book. I've not read it yet, but if you think I should read it, please let me know. The Island of Missing Trees. So this book is basically set in 1974 on the island of Cyprus, and it involves 2 teenagers from opposite sides of a divided land meet at a tavern in the city they both call home. It basically is a diverse book, because I can see Greek, Christian, who is Turkish, who is Muslim, and things like that. And it moves to London, decades later in North London. There's someone who's kind of related to this entire story. Now, to be honest, I've seen a lot of people liking this book, but I don't want to read this book, because I don't want this to be my first Elif Shafak book. I want my first Elif Shafak book to be The 40 Rules of Love, which I've not read yet, and which I need to get to ASAP, because I've been telling myself this for years. The funny thing is that on one of my one of my partner's birthdays 2 to 3 years back, I had gifted him Elif Shafak's The 40 Rules of Love, and he absolutely loved the book. So the point that I have not read it screams something, it says something, which is interesting. And what's interesting is that he has a copy and even I have a copy. So yeah, things like that keep happening. So the declaration here is that I am not going to read this book. I am going to wait for this to be shortlisted so I can read it. I'm not going to read Elif Shafak, at least this one for now. And the next book is The Paper Palace by Miranda Colley Heller. I'm not aware about this author On a perfect August morning, Elle Bishop heads out for a swim in the pond below the Paper Palace, her family's holiday home in Cape Cod. As she dives beneath the water, she relives the passionate encounter she had before against the side of the house that knows all her darkest secrets while her husband and mother chatted to the guests inside. Interesting. Again, it talks about, how this one woman is trying to live her life. I think I'll pass. I think I'm not going to read this. I'll only read it if it's shortlisted. By the way, there's also Reese's book club pick. Reese Witherspoon, her book club pick. And I'm not like the biggest fan of Reese's. I'm not a huge fan of these book club picks, to be honest. I just feel like they are very, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Okay, and that being said, the next book is something that I'm really excited for, and I've already picked it up. Like, while I'm talking to you, I've already started reading this, and that's The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I think it's Erdrich. So basically, this has been on my radar since some time now because Louise Erdrich, won the Pulitzer Prize for her book The Night Manager, and people have been raving about her writing. And when I saw this in the long list, I did not think twice. I just picked up the audiobook and started reading it. And I'm kind of like 1 hour done through it. So I think that's like 7% or something. And I really like it so far. It's basically about, a small independent bookstore in Minneapolis. And it is kind of haunted by the store's most annoying customer. And in this bookstore is where like our main character is working, and our main character has been to prison, and this is like a second chance at a life. And it is interesting because I really like the book so far. So yeah, I'll of course put my review up whenever I read it. I finish reading it. Of course, you'll be like, you're listening to me. But yeah, this is the book that I picked up, and this is the book I'm looking forward to be shortlisted as well, because I don't know, because I'm reading it, and because then there's like 1 less or like 2 less books to read if even Great Circle gets shortlisted. So yeah, and the last book in this list is no, there are more books. Oh my god. Okay, wait, I missed a book, I think. Yeah, so the book that I missed is Final Revival of Opal. Opal, I hope I pronounce that right. It's Opal or Opal, I don't know. And Nev, and it's by Dawnie Walton. This book has been not on my radar, but I've seen quite a few people reading this on YouTube itself, because I know I saw a couple of people reading this, and it basically talks about I'm gonna just call her Opal now, okay? So basically, Opal is a fiercely independent young woman pushing against the grain in her style and attitude, and she's a black punk artist before her time. Despite her unconventional looks, Opal believes that she can be a star. So when the aspiring British singer-songwriter Mr. Charles discovers her one night, she takes up on his offer to make rock music together. Now this is very interesting because it also like talks about racism, because there's someone who brandishes a Confederate flag at a promotional concert, and Opal's like totally against it. She's like, no, this is not how things should go. And yes, I think this is going to be shortlisted. The subject matter in itself is very, very good. It talks about like relevant issues that we have still, today in this world, which is of course racism, and it's an interesting story. I think I'll put this in my list, but I won't read it now. The other books that I mentioned get more preference, but I know this will be shortlisted, and that's why I'm going to keep it for that time. And that being said, that gets me to the last book in this list, which again I have not heard of this book. Let me move. It's called This One Sky Day. So it's by Leone Ross. It talks about, let me just read this out. Dawn breaks across the archipelago of Popisho. The world is stirring awake. Again, each resident with her own list of things to do. A wedding feast to conjure and a cook. An infidelity to... a wedding feast to conjure and cook. There's no full stops here. I don't know why. An infidelity to investigate, a lost soul to set free. Oh, I think it's on purpose. There's no full stop. As the sun rises, two star-crossed lovers try to find their way back to one another across a single day. When night falls, all have been given a gift and many are no longer the same. The sky is pink and some wonder if it'll ever be blue again. Phew. Interesting premise, but I don't think I'll read this. I will wait for the shortlist, and if this is shortlisted, then I will read this. So yes, that was my reaction to the long list. As stated, I've already started reading The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I don't know, you pick whichever surname is correct, whichever pronunciation is correct. It's very, pronunciation is correct. Oh, what's wrong with me? Anyway. So yeah, I mean, some very interesting books in here. Of course, there are books that I've not heard of, because there are a lot of books that I think that kind of get famous through these prizes, and I am looking forward to reading many of these. So yeah, let me know what all are you planning to read. I would like to know what is your, a reaction as well. And thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you on my next video, whenever that is. Bye.